I have been married to Sophie for 6 years. She was once a prideful woman, but unexpectedly fell from grace. I never left her side, never abandoned her. Finally, her new work Muse gained fame, and the talented painter returned to the peak of her career. A reporter asked her, "Who is the man in your painting?" She smiled gently and said, "He is the love of my life." That day, I received her divorce agreement. Chapter 1. The genius painter Sophie returned to the pinnacle of her career with her new work, Muse, after many years. At the art exhibition, all her works were sold at high prices, except for the most eye-catching one, Muse. It was a lifelike oil painting. Under the shimmering moonlight, the lake's surface shimmered with fragmented light, and a young man in white stood against the wind, holding flowers and smiling, captivating everyone. She said, "This one is not for sale, priceless." A reporter asked her, "Who is the man in the painting?" She smiled tenderly and replied, "He is the love of my life." That day, I received the divorce agreement that Sophie had sent me. The money and the house were all mine, and she left with nothing. I saw the live video online and called her, saying, "Congratulations, the art exhibition was a great success." Her tone was indifferent, "It has nothing to do with you." "How is it unrelated?" I raised my voice and questioned, "Didn't you want a clean break? The income from the exhibition is also marital property, we should calculate it." She sneered on the other end, "Morgan, you're really money-minded." I chuckled and said, "Money is more reliable than people." She fell silent for a moment and then said, "Tomorrow, the lawyer will send you a new agreement." I readily agreed, "All right, from now on, we are completely estranged." Neither of us. Before she could finish her sentence, I hung up the phone, as if every second spent listening was a waste. It's hard to imagine that just 4 months ago today, I was praying to spend my whole life with her, hand in hand until old age. Chapter 2. That day was our 6th wedding anniversary, Valentine's Day. I secretly flew back from France, wanting to surprise Sophie. When I arrived at the apartment building, I saw a young boy standing alone in the snow, carrying luggage. His hands were frozen red, but his voice on the phone sounded joyful. "Guess where I am?" I couldn't hear the other side, but the boy's eyebrows relaxed, and he said in a warm voice, "I missed you, so I came to see you." I remembered our long-distance relationship during our university days. When the longing became unbearable, we would do the same, buy a ticket without hesitation and rush to each other. Moved by this scene, I took out my phone to call Sophie. But in the next moment, I saw her coming out of the hallway. She ran straight to the boy and threw herself into his arms. He held her tightly, as if he had caught a precious treasure. In the quiet snowy night, they passionately and deeply kissed. I stood frozen in place, watching their overwhelming love. When Sophie looked up, she finally noticed me standing not far away. I struggled to move forward with my luggage, but it felt like 1,000 mountains and rivers separated us, just a few steps away. Her first instinct was to stand in front of the boy, protecting him. The boy looked confused and leaned in to whisper in her ear, "Who is he?" I didn't know what expression to make in that moment. I stood still in front of them and said calmly, "I am her husband." Upon hearing my words, the boy took big strides and stood in front of Sophie, assuming a protective stance. "This is my fault. Don't blame her for it." I chuckled silently and looked at the woman behind him, her face filled with turmoil. "Aren't you going to say anything?" Sophie pursed her lips, her gaze grew solemn, as if she had made a certain decision. She walked forward and stood side by side with the boy, holding his hand tightly with her fingers intertwined. She said to me, "This is what you see." Perhaps the snowstorm was too intense, my brain was numb from the cold. There were no questions, no arguments. I quietly turned around and went back home. Sophie didn't follow. Chapter 3. The windows of the balcony at home were wide open, and the cold wind was rushing in. I could even imagine Sophie receiving a phone call, opening the window, and seeing the young boy standing elegantly downstairs, her face filled with surprise and joy. The easel next to her was still not tidied up, unfinished artwork on the canvas caught my eye, and the protagonist was undoubtedly the boy from earlier. He held a bouquet of roses, his clothes dancing in the wind, his face filled with the shyness of seeing a loved one. Once upon a time, Sophie had painted me with such care. We met when we were 16 in high school. At that time, she was well known, a rich girl, a top student, and the school's beauty, all the accolades belonged to her. I came from the countryside, a world of difference, and we shouldn't have had any connection, but fate made us sit together as deskmates. My English was not good, and my Mandarin carried a hint of a rural accent, often becoming the subject of ridicule by classmates. She defended me and patiently taught me. The girl always spoke with a smile, a slight upturn of her lips, and it was as if 1,000 flowers bloomed. I secretly loved her for 3 whole years, never daring to entertain the thought, but she also liked me. After the college entrance exam, she didn't choose the prestigious universities as everyone expected, but instead opted for an art school. She said that painting was her lifelong dream, and her family was very supportive. She had the privilege to be willful, but I did not. With my grades at the time, the best option for me was to go to a school in the south, thousands of miles away from her. That summer vacation, she came to my small mountain village to experience the local scenery and asked me to be her guide. We watched the flowers on the hills, the birds in the woods, and the clouds in the sky together. On the last day, my mother brought out our homemade plum wine for her to taste. I didn't stop her, and she drank a glass, becoming so drunk that she couldn't distinguish north from south. She fell into my arms, her face flushed, and she spoke drunkenly. She said, "Morgan, I like you." I helped her pack her things and discovered that every painting of hers was filled with me. When it was time for her to leave, I accompanied her to the train station, walking slowly, wanting to ask her, "Do last night's words count?" Finally, I couldn't resist and spoke up. "Sophie, if I confess now, would it be too late?" She looked at me, tears of joy streaming down her face. "It's not too late. As long as it's you, it will never be too late." We became a couple. For 4 years of college, despite being in a long-distance relationship, I gave her all my love and made her feel safe, letting her know without a doubt that she was the one I loved. She often teasingly said, "Morgan, you love me so much." I let her playfully tease me, waiting until she had enough, then I would lower my head and gently kiss her. From the age of 18 to 28, we loved each other for 10 years. Countless yesterdays passed through my mind. The repressed emotions finally erupted, and I broke down, tearing the paintings into pieces. Chapter 4. I sat alone on the couch until dawn. When Sophie returned, she had a strange fragrance on her, like the scent of hotel shower gel. She looked at me with a hint of guilt in her eyes and said, "I'm sorry." My eyes were bloodshot, and my voice came out hoarse as I asked, "When did it start?" She honestly told me about their past. That boy's name was Stanley, a senior student at the art school, also studying painting. They met last year when she went back to her alma mater for the school anniversary. He admired Sophie's talent and was a loyal and passionate admirer of hers. Their souls connected, often reminiscing about Van Gogh under the starry sky, and having deep conversations about Monet's water lilies by the lake. She said that they were rare soulmates and truly in love. We were together for 10 years, but couldn't compare to their 10 months of acquaintance. When Sophie talked about him, her eyes sparkled and her expression softened. She emphasized many times, "I truly love him." I was consumed with jealousy and madness. He's just a college student, intruding into someone else's marriage. What kind of person can he be? Isn't it just for money? Sophie looked at me, her gaze gradually turning cold. "Morgan, unlike you, he doesn't only see money." Her words pierced deep into me. Sophie was a natural romantic, always considering money as worthless. During her college years, she was already a somewhat famous painter. Many people offered to buy her paintings at a high price, but she refused. Her paintings were always meant for those destined to have them. But life is unpredictable. In her graduation year, her family went bankrupt. Her parents were chased by debt collectors and died in a car accident. She was trapped at home by the creditors. I secretly climbed over the wall to find her and held her, saying, "Sophie, marry me." I had no social status, no wealth, but I had an unwavering heart filled with love. I consulted a lawyer, and it turned out that children were not responsible for their parents' debts. But with the other party's overwhelming numbers, the relentless harassment could ruin Sophie's life. With her mother's consent, I used all our savings, negotiated with the creditors, and helped Sophie clear her debts at the lowest cost. Our life was difficult after marriage. The rented house leaked wind and rain, turning into a small pond during typhoon days. The cold winter wind made it impossible to sleep. We held each other tightly, talking through the night. Sophie tried to reach out to those who once wanted to buy her paintings but only received humiliation. Her previous pride had offended people. Now, when she needed money, she faced rejection everywhere. It pained me, and I forbade her from selling her paintings outside. To make her life more comfortable, I worked 3 jobs every day. If I earned $100, I would spend 99 on her. There was one time when I had a temporary loss of vision due to anemia, and she panicked, taking care of me, her voice trembling even when calling my name. She cried in front of me, unable to control herself. "Not marrying you would be a lifetime regret, but marrying you has burdened you even more, making me feel even more hopeless." I scolded her, "Fool, I never thought of you as a burden." At that time, I felt truly happy. Chapter 5. Let's get a divorce. Sophie's words brought me back to reality. She was resolute, saying, "I can agree to whatever you want." My heart twisted into a knot. "Don't you know what I want?" She didn't understand and simply said, "You set the conditions." I laughed out loud. So, you're willing to give up everything for him? Sophie lowered her gaze and dropped a bombshell. Morgan, I'm pregnant with his child. My heart shattered into pieces. I remembered that we once had a child too. In our second year of marriage, Sophie became pregnant. I was overjoyed. But she secretly had an abortion without telling me. With tear-filled eyes, she said, Morgan, our circumstances couldn't possibly support a child. Let's spare them from suffering in this world. Sophie apologized to me countless times. I held her tightly, forcing a smile, and comforted her, saying, It's okay, we can have another child in the future. That day, she held me tightly and repeated in my ear, I love you. Those words were like a spell that bound our hearts together during our days of having nothing. Since then, I worked even harder. I became adept at reading people's expressions and gradually excelled in my career. My boss was involved in import-export trade and often needed someone to entertain clients. I had a good tolerance for alcohol, so he liked taking me along and even gave me extra bonuses. Every day, I would return home completely intoxicated, and Sophie would stay by my side all night, taking care of me attentively. She would always say, Don't ruin your health for a little money. I paid no mind. I have to think long term. As time went on, I built up a network of contacts and eventually started my own business in the wine industry. I traveled and socialized every day, keeping myself incredibly busy. Sophie would say, having enough money is sufficient. You don't need to work yourself to the bone. But I had two unfulfilled wishes. I always believed that Sophie's future held infinite possibilities. I hoped she could pursue her passion for painting without having to give up her dreams due to mundane matters. And I also hoped that the child we had abandoned would return to us sooner. Fortune favors the diligent, and our lives gradually improved. In our 5th year of marriage, we had a house and savings. Finally, I mustered up the courage to say, Darling, let's have a child. Unexpectedly, she wasn't enthusiastic and simply said, Morgan, it's not the right time. She told me she was going through a creative block and hadn't produced a satisfactory artwork in a long time. I tried to reassure her, Your art is amazing. My friends love it, and Mr. Yang, our boss, said he wants to buy your paintings as decoration for his new home next month. Sophie scoffed, What do those ordinary people know about art? I was taken aback. Realizing my slip of the tongue, she immediately apologized and explained that she didn't look down on business people, she just wanted recognition from more professional individuals. She buried her head deep in my shoulder and whispered, I'm losing confidence. Perhaps at that moment, cracks began to appear in our relationship. But I was too busy to pay much attention to her changes. Not long after, Sophie's mood started to improve, and she often had a smile on her face. I thought she had overcome her creative block, but it turned out her soul had found a new home. She loved the youthfulness of the young man, untouched by the passage of time. He would praise her paintings as the flowers of spring, the rain of summer, the wind of autumn, and the snow of winter, the most beautiful existence in the world. As for me, a businessman consumed by profit, I couldn't resonate with her. Morgan, I'm sorry, Sophie's voice echoed in my ears. I remained silent for a long as the time we spent together. But in the end, there was still a hint of reluctance in my heart. I won't divorce you, I heard myself say. Sophie replied coldly, That's not up to you. In that moment, I heard the sound of love dying. Chapter 6. At the peak of our argument with Sophie, my mother fell ill and was hospitalized. The doctor said it was late-stage cancer. My father had passed away early, and my mother had suffered all her life. When I got married, I was too preoccupied and she insisted on living alone in the countryside, not wanting to burden us. Later, when our financial situation improved slightly, I still didn't have time to be by her side. I felt immense guilt, as I had never allowed her to enjoy a single day of happiness in her lifetime. Lying in the hospital bed, frail and withered, she asked me, And Sophie? I forced a smile and replied cheerfully, She's been busy lately, preparing for an art exhibition. I told my mother that Sophie had gained recognition from a renowned figure in the art world and was about to make a breakthrough. She smiled with contentment and said, Sophie has finally achieved her dream. Your lives will surely get better and better. Mother can rest easy now. I hastily made up an excuse and rushed out of the ward, tears streaming down my face uncontrollably. It seemed like fate had a cruel sense of humor. Not long after our fight, Sophie received news from France that a reclusive master in the art world suddenly expressed interest in her work and wanted to meet her. A dark horse finally meets its benefactor, and the two of them hit it off instantly. They lamented not having met sooner. Sophie saw that man as her lucky star. She said it was he who helped her rediscover her passion for painting, leading to this opportunity. She would never know that it was me who had gone to great lengths to secure this chance for her. And now, I was merely making a wedding dress for someone else. I washed my face and returned to the hospital room. My mother suddenly expressed her desire to meet Sophie. I couldn't refuse. Reluctantly, I finally reached out to her. Perhaps driven by pride, I didn't want to appear weak in front of her. I approached the conversation with a negotiating tone. Sophie, let's make a deal. I agree to the divorce, and you accompany me in this act. All right. She agreed straightforwardly. Even though it was the answer I wanted, my heart began to twist again. Disappointment, anger, sadness, negative emotions swarmed over me like countless venomous insects, devouring me bit by bit. I think I might be losing my sanity. Chapter 7. Sophie arrived on time. Having not seen each other for half a month, she appeared even more graceful and charming. It seemed like she was doing well. We both restrained our emotions and pretended to be intimate as we entered the hospital room. My mother lay weakly on the hospital bed. When she saw us, her cloudy eyes momentarily brightened, and she struggled to sit up and talk to us. She admonished me to cherish my wife and not let her down. She also urged Sophie to live a good life with me. My mother was not one to speak much before, but this time, it seemed like she had so much to say. I knew she couldn't rest easy. Sophie responded to her instructions one by one, saying, "Okay." Finally, my mother clasped our hands together and instructed, "Take good care of each other in this lifetime." I couldn't help but well up with tears. In fact, I wanted to tell her that if she left, I would have no family left in this world. But now, the words stuck in my throat, and I couldn't say anything. Sophie gently patted my back, her tender gaze reminiscent of the 18-year-old girl she once was. Feeling somewhat dazed, we left the hospital room, our hands still intertwined. I embarrassingly discovered that I still longed for that slight warmth between our palms. Can't we just not get divorced? An absurd thought lingered in my mind. Suddenly, my phone rang, and Sophie released my hand. Confused, I looked up at her, but the image of the girl had already vanished. She went to the side to answer the call, and snippets of casual conversation drifted into my ears. I didn't know what was said on the other end, but she blushed and scolded, "How shameless." Then, in a sweet voice, she said, "I'll be home soon." I looked at this woman and suddenly felt a sense of unfamiliarity. After finishing the call, she saw my lost expression and furrowed her brow, asking, "You look pale. Are you sick?" As she reached out her hand to touch my forehead, I instinctively flinched away. Both of us froze. Her hand hung suspended in the air, and she awkwardly said, "We can wait until your mother's health improves before proceeding with the divorce." My sinking consciousness finally awakened, and I nodded in agreement. Chapter 8. My mother's condition didn't improve, and she started experiencing memory problems. Every now and then, she would say she wanted to see Sophie. She had been pretending with me for 3 months, accompanying me to listen to those repetitive instructions. Every time Sophie came to the hospital, Stanley would call frequently. Eventually, he started coming along himself. The day they showed up holding hands, I got really angry and stood in front of them, blocking their way. "Tell him to roll as far away as possible." Sophie explained to me that he would wait nearby and not let my mother see him. I refused to compromise and sarcastically remarked, "Can't you two stop showing off your affection?" The boy who had always been silent suddenly spoke up angrily, "Are you going too far? You're getting divorced, stop trying to mess with people." He became more and more agitated, almost getting into a fight with me. "She's been busy preparing for an exhibition and doesn't even have time to eat." "I'm worried, that's why I came alone." Sophie held his hand and soothed him softly, "Don't be angry, you're scaring our child." Stanley glared at me, lowered his gaze to her, and said, "But I worry about you." Their affectionate appearance made my stomach churn. I sneered, "We haven't even divorced yet, and you two are having an affair, you know that? Or should I consider it a rental, a paid service?" Sophie froze, tears welling up in her eyes. "Morgan, have you gone mad?" Stanley gritted his teeth and glared at me, "A grown man speaking so cruelly, no wonder your wife doesn't want you. I can't stand it anymore. Today, either leave with me or stay with you, she can only choose one." Then, he turned to the woman by his side, his gaze pleading. There was no suspense. Sophie left hand in hand with her lover. That day, my mother's condition was actually fine. I lied and said that Sophie had something urgent to attend to, and she didn't inquire further. But in the evening, she suddenly fell into a coma, and the doctor issued a critical condition notice. When she regained consciousness, she said she wanted to see Sophie again. I frantically called her, and she took a long time to answer. I crouched on the ground, holding my head, and asked, "Can you come visit?" She replied directly, "It's too late." I panicked, "My mother is deteriorating." Impatiently, she said, "I advise you not to make these kinds of jokes." I was shocked and angry. "Do you think I would joke about my mother's life?" She fell silent for a moment and said, "It's raining tonight, and I'm pregnant. He won't let me go out." I disregarded my pride and almost pleaded, "Let him bring you here, or I'll find a friend to drive over and pick you up. I promise your safety, please. We've had 10 years together, please help me one last time." She sighed, "Let me discuss it with him." I grasped onto a glimmer of hope and incoherently said, "Can we just forget about our argument today? As long as you come tonight, I'll agree to whatever you want, okay?" The sky thundered and lightning flashed, burying the sound of my shattered pride in the darkness. A hoarse voice came from the other end of the phone, tinged with desire. Sophie let out a strained moan and softly scolded, "Stop it." The call was abruptly disconnected, and when I called again, no one answered. That day, she never showed up, even until late at night. My mother sensed something was wrong and asked very carefully, "Are you and Sophie having a disagreement?" I tried to pretend to be relaxed. "No, she's on her way here." Her brows furrowed tighter, and she told me to call Sophie. She wanted to talk to her for a few words. But Sophie's phone was already turned off. Later, my mother's consciousness gradually faded, and she kept muttering, "Son, if you're not doing well, how can I rest assured?" When the sky was faintly bright, she took her last breath, holding onto my hand tightly, refusing to close her eyes. My world collapsed into ruins. Chapter 9. I will bring my mother's ashes back to the countryside for burial. Sophie came along. She lowered her head, filled with guilt on her face. "I'm sorry, I didn't know that night." I asked her to leave, feeling powerless. "Don't call her mom, you don't deserve to." "Morgan, can't you speak nicely?" Sophie's voice softened. "I just wanted to come and see if there's anything I can help with." I coldly replied, "No need." She refused to leave and stayed by my side. The funeral was simple, only a few neighbors from the village were invited to help. After everything was over and everyone had left, I finally calmed down and said to Sophie, "Let's talk." She nodded in agreement. In a cold tone, I said, "Let's quickly go through with the divorce proceedings." She furrowed her brow and changed the subject. "I want to explain what happened that night." "I don't want to hear it," I interrupted her, continuing, "You are at fault, and I want you out of my life. I know exactly what assets we have in the house. Don't try any tricks or negotiate with me, or else I will expose your dirty secrets to everyone." Sophie looked mournful. "Morgan, the assets in the house were earned by you. Do you think I would fight you for them?" I sneered. "You never truly know a person." She looked disappointed. "You weren't like this before. People change," I said. The prolonged silence was interrupted by a phone call from Stanley. She went outside to answer it. I closed the front door directly, and she never came back. That night, I lay in the bed of the old house and had a long dream. I dreamed of my 22-year-old self, bringing Sophie home against all odds and telling my mother that I wanted to marry her. Creditors chased us to our home, causing daily arguments and threats. My mother hid her in the room and instructed, "Sophie must not go out, leave everything to Ahuai to handle." I dealt with them alone for several months, finally resolving everything before the Chinese New Year. It snowed on New Year's Eve, and I rushed back from out of town with a tired body. Snowflakes fell on me, layer by layer. But I didn't feel cold. The moment I returned home, she was the first to open the door and rush into my arms. I stumbled a few steps, but still held her tightly. "I never want to be apart from you again." Sophie's crying and smiling face was incredibly adorable. I was about to respond when the scene suddenly spun. I stood dumbfounded as I watched her rush into someone else's arms in the snow, passionately kissing his lips. "Sophie! Sophie!" I called her name repeatedly, but she couldn't hear me at all. Suddenly, everything turned pitch black, and I started to feel a strong sense of weightlessness, as if falling endlessly into an abyss. The next day, I woke up with a high fever, my consciousness muddled. I lay at home for 2 days, feeling close to death. One day, I received a message from a business partner, saying that there were problems with the supply of red wine, causing a significant loss of money. I sat up in shock, quickly got dressed, and went out. Then, I went to see a doctor, took medicine, and recovered. Chapter 10. These 4 months have drained me of so much energy. I've made many mistakes in my business and have been so busy that I haven't even had time to be sad. Once again, I heard Sophie's name, along with the news of her great success at the art exhibition. The highly demanding art world praised her, considering her a hidden gem that had been overlooked for years. Even the reclusive old master made a public appearance at the exhibition, expressing that Sophie is the most talented young female artist he has ever encountered. The industry was shaken. Media flocked to the scene, and the internet was flooded with reports. With her striking appearance and enhanced beauty, her popularity surpassed that of any celebrity. The hashtag goddess artist Sophie hashtag soared to the top of the trending list. All of her artworks were sold out, and there were even offers of 10 million to purchase her most eye-catching piece of the day, Muse. But Sophie declined. Reporters caught wind of gossip and asked her about the man in her paintings. She openly declared her love. My college roommate, Lance, forwarded me this video, asking, why would Sophie say such things? Clutching the divorce agreement I had just received, I replied, nothing, she fell in love with someone else, and were planning to get a divorce. Lance immediately called me, furious, saying, weren't things fine just 4 months ago? Doesn't she know what you've endured in France for her sake? I answered calmly, even if she knew, it wouldn't change anything. On our 6th wedding anniversary, I wanted to prepare a special gift for Sophie. I knew that the person she admired the most was a renowned figure in the art world, someone who rarely appeared in public during his younger years and has now become even more reclusive, leaving no trace. After exhausting all my methods and connections, I finally received a piece of information that was hard to verify. Someone had seen him selling his artwork on the streets of Montmartre in Paris. So, using a business trip as an excuse, I went to France alone. It was my first time traveling abroad, and being unfamiliar with the place, my luggage was stolen on the first day. In my haste to chase after the thief, I was led into a secluded alley. There, a group of street thugs gathered, and I was outnumbered. They pinned me to the ground and started beating me. Before losing consciousness, I heard someone shout something in French, and everyone quickly fled. I woke up in the hospital, with only minor injuries thanks to Lance saving me. We were college roommates, and he went abroad a year after I got married. We gradually lost contact, and I never expected to reunite in this way. He helped me a lot, taking care of me during my recovery from the injury. He asked me, won't you tell Sophie? I shook my head. During that time, Sophie would often lock herself in the studio, seeming to be going through a crucial period. I didn't want to worry her. As soon as my injuries improved slightly, I hurriedly went out every day, guarding the Montmartre district. Truth be told, I didn't have much certainty about finding the master of the art world, I just didn't want to give up any possibilities. When Lance learned about the purpose of my trip, his eyes widened, giving me a look as if I were a fool. Then he exaggeratedly mocked me, saying, you just spoil your lady, don't you? One day, she'll spoil you too much. I rolled my eyes at him. I would be willing. The two of us became like a team, as if we were back in college. In the Montmartre district, I made a deal with a street vendor and rented his booth to display several of Sophie's artworks from different periods in the most prominent spot. Every day, I prayed for the goddess of luck to visit. It happened to be winter at that time, and apart from sleeping, I spent all my time on the street, enduring the freezing cold winds that left my ears chapped. Lance would always buy medicine for me while sarcastically remarking, you brought this upon yourself. After staying in France for 3 weeks, Valentine's Day was approaching, and I decided to return home. This impulsive trip to a foreign country was indeed too rash, and not finding the person was to be expected. I thought that I would act again once I had more concrete information. Unexpectedly, something quietly happened. On the last day, as I was preparing to close the booth, the master of the art world appeared and immediately took notice of Sophie's artwork from when she was 18. He smiled and asked me who the creator of this piece was, and I proudly said Sophie's name. He pointed to the not for sale label attached to the painting and asked, not for sale? I nodded, this is part of my personal collection. Then why display it? I replied, I hope more people can see this remarkable artist. He pondered for a moment, looked at the painting for a long time, and finally left with a smile. I knew about this gentleman's temperament. He was known for cherishing talent. In the past, he had discovered many unknown artists who had now become industry giants. I knew that Sophie's opportunity had come. Things went much smoother than I had expected. I believe that talented individuals are destined to break through the clouds and shine. I genuinely felt happy for Sophie. She was getting closer to her dreams. On our wedding anniversary, I lied to Sophie that I couldn't come back from France and wanted to give her a surprise. But her reaction was indifferent. She only said, I know. At first, I felt a bit sad, but when I boarded the plane and saw her post on social media saying, longing spans mountains and seas, the knot in my heart immediately dissipated. On the way back, I still fantasized about our beautiful future together. How ironic it is that her longing had already been given to someone else. Chapter 11. Aren't you feeling regretful? Lance asked me. I calmly replied, of course I do, but what's more important now is to live my own life well. He let out a sigh of relief and said, Morgan, sometimes you're frighteningly rational. I chuckled and said, thank you for the compliment. After hanging up the phone, the surroundings became quiet again, and I clicked on that video. Sophie smiled tenderly and affectionately in front of the camera, saying that the boy was the love of her life. Indeed, I still felt uncomfortable in my heart. I called Sophie and told her that the income from the art exhibition should be considered premarital property, and if we were to get divorced, it should belong to me. She sarcastically mocked me but agreed. It seemed like she was really eager to marry her true love. I tried to consider that trip to France as an investment, and now I had reaped a substantial fortune, so it wasn't a total loss. Thinking like this, I gradually made peace with myself. Money truly is a good thing. That day, I opened the best bottle of red wine for myself and drank until late at night. The next morning, I was woken up by a phone call. Lance's voice sounded distant and close at the same time, saying, "Open the door." I stumbled out, opened the door, and saw him carrying his luggage, with a tired expression on his face. "You didn't even mention such a big thing to me. Not much of a friend, are you?" I stood there in a daze. He opened his arms and smiled at me. "Bro, I'm here to accompany you." I hugged him, moved, and said, "Indeed, you're a true friend." But reality proved that I had been moved too early. For a man who was getting divorced, a man in the throes of passionate love was simply poison. I waited for him in the evening to play games together, but he hesitated for a long time before reluctantly ending his video call with his girlfriend. I grabbed his collar and said with hatred, "Isn't it a bit too much to show affection in front of me?" He shamelessly laughed. "This is called fighting fire with fire." I actually admired him. Despite being deeply hurt in the past, he could still live so freely. "Do you regret loving your ex-girlfriend?" The moment the words came out of my mouth, I regretted it. Lance didn't show much emotion. He simply said, "In a relationship, if it doesn't end as you hoped, it doesn't mean it was a tragedy." I seriously pondered his words. I think there's no need to resent the 18-year-old her because of the 28-year-old Sophie. That girl who dazzled the years is simply no longer there. I will accept it and gradually let go. Chapter 12. A month later, Sophie and I obtained our divorce certificate. I bought a vineyard in Montmartre, Paris, intending to go to France and learn winemaking on my own. Lance had already settled there and welcomed me to join him. On the day I left the country, Sophie and Stanley had a grand wedding. The bride wore a custom-made wedding dress, shimmering with elegance. I couldn't help but think of when we got married. We were truly poor. We only bought a cheap white dress for $200, and the bouquet was a wild cotton tree flower picked from the roadside, simple and plain, just like our love back then. The past drifted away with the wind, dispersed like scattered clouds. Everything has changed. I boarded the plane, heading towards a brand new life. Chapter 13. My life gradually became peaceful, and I thought I would never have any intersection with Sophie again. But unexpectedly, a year later, when I returned home to pay respects to my ancestors, I encountered her once more. Sophie stood before my mother's grave, holding a bouquet of white chrysanthemums. She had a moment of surprise when she saw me and called out in a hoarse voice, "Morgan." I asked in a deep voice, "What are you doing here?" She took a few steps closer to me, anxiously replying, "I thought I might run into you. You sold the house, changed your phone number, and I couldn't find you anywhere." I distanced myself from her and asked coldly, "Do you have something to say?" The mountain breeze swept up some fine sand, perhaps irritating her eyes, as they started to turn slightly red. She said, "I just wanted to talk to you." I felt like I heard the biggest joke in the world. "Sophie, you have a husband now. Come on, let's not be a nuisance in front of my parents' graves." She paid no attention, unmoving. I couldn't drive her away, so I simply ignored her. "I want to explain what happened the night my mother passed away," Sophie continued speaking, disregarding whether I wanted to listen or not. She said, "I was planning to go out, but he stopped me, and I accidentally lost the baby." I gave a perfunctory response, "Oh." With her head lowered, her tone filled with sorrow, she said, "Morgan, that night I had a miscarriage." My hand, which was placing the offerings, paused for a moment, but I still didn't say a word to her. After a while, she suddenly spoke again. "If I had come that night, would you still hate me like this?" I lifted my head and met her eyes, where the pain was clearly visible. I didn't understand the meaning behind her current expression. I quickly averted my gaze, pretending I hadn't seen anything, burned 3 incense sticks for my parents, and updated them on my current situation, telling them that I was doing very well now. After finishing the ritual and descending the mountain, Sophie continued to follow me, and her words became particularly numerous. She spoke about how we used to admire the flowers on the hillside, the birds in the forest, and the clouds in the sky in our village. She remembered everything. "But Sophie, the flowers on the hillside no longer bloom, the birds in the forest have flown away, and even the clouds in the sky are not the same as they used to be. Everything has changed." Chapter 14. The house in my hometown was left unattended and unfit for living. After spending a night in a hotel in town, I flew directly back to France. The unexpected reunion with Sophie didn't stir up much emotion in my heart. Coincidentally, Lance started his own fashion design brand and became busy with work. I hired people to take care of my estate, so I had plenty of leisure time and spent most of it helping him in the studio. I joked, both of us studied trade, but now one is a tailor and the other is a winemaker. We really don't stick to our original professions." He waved his finger and said, No, life is a process of gradually discovering oneself." During our casual conversation, I asked him, "When did you become interested in fashion design?" He hesitated for a moment and answered softly, "When you married Sophie." He said there was something I never knew. "Do you remember the outfits you both wore at the wedding? The patterns were exquisite, yet the price was unbelievably cheap. You always thought it was my friends who helped us, right?" I nodded. He continued, "Actually, Sophie didn't want to spend too much money, so she only bought the simplest white dress and suit. But she didn't want you to feel shortchanged, so she personally drew the patterns and sought advice from my designer friend to embroider them little by little. Even the veil, she made it herself. I didn't even know she could sew. At first, she didn't know either, but my friend was exceptionally skilled, and she was smart too. She learned in just a few days. She didn't want you to blame yourself, so she didn't let me tell you." He said that at that time, he was only assisting, but when he saw us wearing the outfits, he felt a sense of accomplishment. Our thoughts drifted back to the past together. He recalled, on the day of the wedding, when you lifted Sophie's veil and she saw your face, her emotional and tearful expression. I still remember it. I had mixed feelings and chuckled, she really loved me back then. Lance thought for a moment and said, "Actually, I ran into Sophie a couple of days ago." I didn't have much of a reaction and calmly said, "Paris is the city of art, and she's a painter. It's normal for her to be here." He shook his head. "I think she came to find you. That night, when you left your things at my place, I went after you and happened to see her following behind you, keeping her distance." I joked, "I remember you have night blindness, did you mistake someone else?" Lance angrily retorted, "Do you think I'm blind? I even had a chat with her. Bro, I intentionally told her about your previous visit to Paris to meet the art master. We can't do good deeds without leaving a trace." Remembering that, I gave him a thumbs up. Lance sighed. After she heard it, she froze, looking completely lost and pitiful. I paused and said, "It's no longer my concern." Chapter 15. A capable girl has come to my estate and she has taken excellent care of my grapes. Thanks to her, the newly brewed wine has a high quality, and I received a big order. It was quite a coincidence that the clients who ordered the wine were hosting a party, inviting renowned figures from the art world, including Sophie. When I went to deliver the wine, I ran into her and Stanley. Their demeanor was strange, with few words exchanged, not resembling that of a newlywed couple. I didn't linger for long, just signed the order and left. Sophie saw me and followed, but Stanley didn't react much. I hurriedly walked away, and Sophie caught up, grabbing my hand. In that moment of skin contact, she quickly let go, saying, "I'm sorry." "Sophie, what do you want?" "Morgan, She hesitated, and I lost my patience. She seemed to suddenly remember something, and her lackluster eyes instantly brightened. "I want to paint a landscape of France. Can you be my guide?" Afraid of my refusal, she added, "You can set the terms." I replied, "I don't need money." She slumped, almost begging, "Morgan, can you give me a chance to make amends?" I looked at her coldly. "Make amends for what? I already know about the influential figure in the art world." I calmly said, "Being chosen by him was your own ability, and I also took your money. We owe each other nothing." Sophie lowered her head and murmured softly, "Why didn't you tell me back then?" I chuckled, "Would anything have changed if I had?" The pain in her eyes was particularly evident, and she stubbornly said, "Maybe we wouldn't have ended up like this today." I couldn't help but feel ironic. "Sophie, wake up. We've been together for so many years, and I've done countless foolish things for you. Your heart wasn't with me anymore from the beginning, and anything I said or did was in vain. Besides, I don't value your momentary sentiment." Perhaps I had once fantasized about this scenario, where the heartless person suddenly wakes up and regrets their actions. But now that the moment had arrived, it didn't feel as satisfying as I had imagined. How did that stunning girl turn into what she is today? I paused and said earnestly, "Sophie, stop making excuses for yourself, or else I will look down on you." She stiffened, her face filled with pain. "Take care on the path you've chosen." After saying that, I didn't look back at her and walked away without turning my head. That night, Lance had to work late and asked me to bring him some supper. It was already dark, and his studio was located in a remote area. 2 street lamps on the way were broken, leaving the path dim and silent. Suddenly, 2 knife-wielding individuals jumped out from the roadside, menacingly robbing me of all my belongings. I didn't have much money on me, and after rummaging through my bag, they spoke a few sentences in poorly pronounced French, which I couldn't quite understand. They then started throwing punches. I fought back against them. In the chaos, a figure quickly rushed over and struck one of the assailants on the head with a stone. The knife-wielding thug revealed his ferociousness and retaliated by stabbing the person twice before fleeing in panic. Everything happened too quickly, and when I came to my senses, I saw Sophie covered in blood, collapsing to the ground. I rushed her to the hospital, where the doctor said she had been stabbed in the abdomen, fortunately not hitting any vital organs. However, the tendons in her right hand were severed when she tried to block the knife, and it was likely that she would never be able to paint again. Lying on the hospital bed, her face pale, the first thing she asked upon seeing me was if I had been hurt. I shook my head, furrowing my brows tighter. She smiled and reassured me, "Don't worry, my injuries aren't severe." After much internal struggle, I decided to tell her the truth. Sophie's smile froze for a moment, but then she suddenly brightened up, deceiving herself, "It's okay, as long as you're safe." But she wasn't a good actress after all. She turned away, not looking at me, and her whole body trembled. I tried to comfort her. "The doctor didn't say it's completely hopeless. And even if your right hand can't work, you can try with your left hand. There will always be a way." She suddenly turned her head, her eyes red, and asked, "Morgan, if I divorce Stanley, what about us?" I interrupted her, speaking frankly, "Sophie, there won't be an us anymore. Take care of your injuries and don't think about anything else." The despair in Sophie's eyes was painfully clear. Tears welled up in her eyes as she pleaded, "At least for tonight, can you please not leave?" I calmly replied, "The one who can be by your side now is Stanley, not me." However, that night Stanley didn't show up, and in the end, I didn't leave. During Sophie's surgery, I called Stanley using her phone, but unfortunately, no one answered. Later, I sent a text message, but there was no reply either. In the middle of the night, she developed a low-grade fever and even vomited blood. The doctor examined her again and said she had gastric cancer, not in an advanced stage yet, and with proactive treatment, there was hope for a full recovery. I didn't understand why she had let herself deteriorate like this, despite having wealth and status now, but I didn't ask anything. The next afternoon, Stanley arrived, dressed elegantly and radiating a glow. He only focused on the doctor and inquired if Sophie's hand could still paint, not even noticing my presence. I bid farewell to Sophie, saying, "Take good care of your health. I'm leaving." She didn't say anything, lying on the hospital bed with a lifeless gaze. Chapter 16. After Sophie's right hand became disabled and she couldn't paint anymore, the value of all her works skyrocketed. The news of the public auction of her famous piece Muse, which had brought her overnight fame, quickly stirred up a buzz. Having married the male protagonist from her painting shortly after the art exhibition, Sophie's story became a popular topic among netizens. The painting itself gained even more value due to this romantic love story and was eventually purchased by a collector for a staggering $50 million. However, just a few days later, unexpected developments unfolded. Hashtag Stanley selling fake paintings. Hashtag Sophie's infidelity during marriage. These two headlines simultaneously trended. Sophie held a press conference and publicly announced that the original artwork of Muse had long been destroyed, and the piece being sold was a forgery by Stanley. In front of the cameras, she admitted that the romantic story behind Muse was actually an ugly extramarital affair, revealing that she had abandoned her husband of 10 years when she achieved fame and success. Netizens erupted in outrage, condemning both the unfaithful woman and the despicable man. Following Sophie's exposé, the police launched an investigation into the sale of counterfeit paintings. Not long after, Stanley was arrested on charges of producing and selling counterfeit goods. Due to the significant amount involved, he faced a potential life sentence. Since then, Sophie disappeared from the public eye. My life continued peacefully, like grass growing on a riverbank, leaves sprouting on trees, undisturbed and serene. The winery business was thriving, and 6 months later, I encountered a peculiar customer, a 16-year-old French girl. She would come every few days to buy wine, specifically requesting the ones I personally brewed, with a special request. She asked me to teach her Chinese, one sentence at a time, as she carefully recorded my words with a voice recorder. Sometimes it would be simple greetings like good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and sometimes it would be something else. On Valentine's Day, she came to buy wine again, asking me to teach her the phrase "I love you." At that time, I had entered into a new relationship with the girl who took care of my estate exceptionally well. After recording "I love you" as per the customer's request, she suddenly leaned in and added, "I love you too." I affectionately tousled her hair and turned to apologize to the girl, saying, "I added an extra phrase, is that okay?" The girl pursed her lips, seemingly conflicted, but ultimately didn't say anything, and left with the wine. That night, I received a call from an unknown number. There was silence on the other end, long and enduring. Thinking it was a wrong number, and coincidentally, my girlfriend called me to have dinner, so I hung up directly. After that, the girl never returned to my winery. Chapter 17. Sophie's name reappeared in the public eye shortly after Valentine's Day. I stared blankly at the trending hashtag Sophie's last work hashtag on the search rankings. The news said that her body was found in an old farmhouse in France, ravaged by illness and poverty. The only remaining possession was a painting titled Endearment, depicting a couple in wedding attire. The bride wore a white dress, holding a bouquet of cotton flowers, while the groom gently embraced her. Both of their faces were obscured by a veil, hazy and indistinct. Experts in the industry praised it as Sophie's best work of her lifetime. Internet users, on the other hand, were more curious whether the artist was reminiscing about a lost love or had found a new kindred spirit. As I gazed at the bouquet in the bride's hands, memories of the past flooded back. The year I married Sophie, the cotton flowers bloomed unusually early. I picked some and tied them together with ribbons. She asked me, "Why not roses?" With a mysterious smile, I replied, "Because I love the symbolism of cotton flowers." Chapter 18 Extra. Sophie's perspective. I married the boy I liked at first sight when we were young, promising to be together for a lifetime, never to part. Although our days after marriage were modest, they were still sweet. When did things start to go wrong? Looking back now, it must have been when we lost our first child. That was the first time I deeply felt the powerlessness of life. After that incident, he started working harder, counting every penny, consumed by money. My paintings didn't sell, so he took matters into his own hands, using his connections to introduce me to business opportunities. It was like the essay prompts we had in our childhood, just paint according to the client's demands. Each artwork lacked its own soul and thoughts, only seeking to satisfy the other party. I didn't like it, but it was an opportunity he fought for, and I should cherish it. Our life did improve little by little. I believed that having enough money was sufficient, but he was never content. Every day, he was busy, running around, not even having time to exchange a few words with me. He would introduce me to his business friends, raising his glass to them with familiarity, saying, "Please continue to support my wife." Out of obligation, those people would buy my paintings at exorbitant prices and then joke, "Sophie married a good husband." Honestly, I despised him for this submissive behavior. I felt increasingly suffocated, even developing a dislike for my own art. Later, I met Stanley. He quietly accompanied me as I painted, reminiscent of Morgan from years ago. He understood me and appreciated my art, not just concerned about whether they could fetch a good price. My gloomy days suddenly gained a touch of color, gradually reclaiming my vitality and the original intention of painting. I admit, I couldn't suppress the feeling of being drawn to him. I believe this pure and innocent young man is my destined love. As for Morgan and me, we were wrong from the beginning. On our 6th wedding anniversary, Morgan discovered our affair, and I made a decision. After leaving Morgan, I felt relieved. What surprised me even more was that the esteemed figure in the art world, whom I admired the most, contacted me proactively, wanting to meet me. He told me that he stumbled upon my paintings at a street stall in France and admired my talent. The painting depicted a simple village, with a young boy standing on a hillside. Although only his back was shown, it was vivid enough. That was a piece I painted when I was 18, a gift for Morgan. He cherished it back then, but perhaps he sold it hastily when he needed money. That's how he is, putting money above everything else. It doesn't matter anymore, we're getting divorced anyway. With the mentorship of the esteemed figure in the art world, I was able to successfully hold an art exhibition. I succeeded. Even though Morgan left me with nothing, for the present making money has become an effortless task. My beloved and I held a grand wedding. I thought this was the life I wanted. But things started to get strange. I started dreaming of Morgan frequently. Sometimes, I would wake up in the middle of the night and see the man beside me, feeling a sense of unreality, a hollow feeling in my heart. I started immersing myself in my art, spending my days locked away in the studio. I used to do this often before. Morgan would prepare 3 meals a day for me. Even when he was away on business trips, he would call to make sure I ate and slept on time. But Stanley doesn't care about these things. After we got married, he rarely spends time discussing my artwork with me. If I express any grievances, he would slam the door and leave. I started to uncontrollably miss Morgan. When I have dinner with Stanley at fancy restaurants, I would think back to the days when Morgan and I would huddle together in a rented room, sharing a meat bun. When I buy expensive gifts for Stanley, I would remember our first wedding anniversary when Morgan secretly saved up money to buy me a Dior lipstick and an Estée Lauder skincare set. I scolded him for wasting money while being moved to tears. And then, when I brought up divorce and called him a man who only cares about money, it hit me like a bolt out of the blue. I impulsively called Morgan, but his number was no longer in service. I quietly went to our old home, which now belonged to someone else. I saw a happy family inside the house, and for a moment, I wondered if I had lost the happiness that was within my reach. I shook my head and banished these thoughts from my mind. I reminded myself that my choices cannot be wrong, and they must not be, so I doubled my efforts to be good to Stanley. But life is ironic. Stanley cheated on me, and the real him was completely different from what I imagined. He would send seductive photos to other women late at night and affectionately call them wife. Morgan, this is how it feels to be betrayed. I was truly wicked in the past. Stanley threatened me, saying that if I divorced him, he would make sure I never find peace. I couldn't fight back. Within a year of our marriage, our life felt like a tomb. Chapter 19. I often return to Morgan's hometown. No matter where he is, I always come back here, hoping to meet him someday. During the Qingming festival, we truly reunited. He looked well, confident, and full of vitality. He was doing well without me. He talked about his vineyard in France in front of his parents' graves, and I silently kept that in my heart. I started flying to foreign countries frequently, just to catch a glimpse of him secretly. One day, I ran into Lance, whom I hadn't seen in years, and I learned a truth. Behind my success and fame was his wholehearted devotion. In reality, he hadn't changed, it was me who had changed. In the passage of time, I forgot about the initial love and commitment. I had truly received a wonderful love, but I lost him. This realization pierced my heart with pain. I still decided to divorce Stanley. He demanded to receive 10 times more money than what Morgan had initially. I agreed, but I needed some time. We were both invited to an art exhibition in France, and during the dinner, I unexpectedly encountered Morgan. I couldn't control my urge to get closer to him. That night, he was attacked, and without thinking, I rushed to save him. He took me to the hospital and showed genuine concern for me. How wonderful it was. If losing one hand could bring Morgan back, I wouldn't have a single complaint. But he was unwilling to give me that chance. Only heaven knows how desperately I wanted to hold on to him when he left. But he walked away so quickly, and in that moment when he turned around, I couldn't even grasp a piece of his sleeve. I suppose this is my retribution. In the future, he will meet someone 1,000 times better than me, while I won't find anyone better than him. Chapter 20. After returning home, I fell ill for a long time. During my hospital stay, Stanley never visited even once. Soon, I received news that Muse was being auctioned at a high price, even though I had destroyed that painting myself. The only explanation was that someone had forged it. I confronted Stanley at home, only to find 2 bodies entangled in the room. Our marriage was even more unbearable than I had imagined. Stanley had a girlfriend whom he had been in love with for years. She had fallen into bad habits and owed a lot of money to loan sharks. He married me just for the money. He proposed a deal, since my right hand was useless now, equivalent to losing my means of earning money. If I remained silent, we could split the money from selling the paintings in half. Stanley told me that he truly loved that girl, but she owed too much money and would die if she couldn't pay it back. So, he did have a heart, but it was invested in someone else. He was even willing to take risks for her sake. It was both despicable and pitiful. I held a press conference, and both he and I would pay the price for our actions. On the day of his sentencing, we divorced. My assets had already been emptied by him, and once again, I had nothing. I started trying to paint with my left hand, but the quality of my work was far inferior to before. Still, I could sell them on the street for some money. It took me half a year to save up enough money to go to France. The doctor told me that my stomach cancer had reached an advanced stage, and I didn't have much time left. If possible, I wanted to be closer to him when death approached. I rented a rundown farmhouse near Morgan's estate. Next door lived a kind-hearted couple with an adorable daughter. I often asked her to buy wine for me from Morgan's place, and each time, she would record a message for me. I just longed to hear his voice. The wine he made was my medicine, in which I could briefly forget the piercing pain. I often dreamt of Morgan. He would be dressed in a sharp suit, his gaze tenderly fixed on me, saying, "Sophie, we got married." But in my waking moments, the intense longing would torment me, and I poured it all into my paintings. Surprisingly, even with just my left hand, I could still paint Morgan exceptionally well. After all, in my youth, I had already sketched his features countless times. I depicted myself beside him in the painting and named it True Love. But Morgan's eyes stared directly at me, unsettling my heart. He must despise those 2 words. I painted a veil with oil colors, covering our faces, selfishly adding those 2 words to the painting. If there is a next life, I will never let go of your hand. I curled up next to the painting, allowing loneliness and despair to consume me. Valentine's Day arrived in the blink of an eye, and my body was reaching its limit. I realized that I was close to death. At a time like this, I should be allowed to be willful, right? I asked the girl next door to record the words I love you for me, but she told me it hadn't recorded successfully. Such a pity. At night, I couldn't resist calling Morgan. What should I say? Before I could prepare myself to speak, I heard a woman's voice. She called his name in a coquettish tone, and Morgan responded with a hint of indulgence. That was the voice of someone in love, a voice that I was once so familiar with. I understood that I had truly and completely lost him. He hung up the phone without a word, and I coughed up a mouthful of blood. Just as everything plunged into darkness, I saw the bride in the painting lift her veil and look at the groom beside her. She held a kapok flower in her hand and asked, "Why not roses?" He smiled mysteriously and replied, "Because I love the symbolism of the kapok flower." Suddenly, I remembered that I had once told Morgan. I loved the kapok flower the most because its symbolism represented the wisdom of love. Cherish the people around you and the present happiness.